Welcome to Global Eye, not just what you need to know, but what you want to know here. I'm Ellie Hockenberg, and together, as always, we're going to take a wider and deeper look to the world we live in. So let's see what we have on tonight's show. The fog of war or the fog of the Secretary of War? Is the battle against narco-terror firing back? What season is it? No, not holiday season. It's coup season. Benin becomes the latest African country in a string. Are all coups created equal? Move over, Noble. Here comes FIFA. Trump gets his Peace Prize. The winner takes it all. And it's not paper wraps, but year wraps, marking the best gift ever. How music streaming apps work the algorithm to make us feel oh so very special. But before we get to all of this and so much more, we're eyeing the globe's biggest stories. And that's an actual blockbuster deal. Netflix swallows Warner Brothers $72 billion. Yes, Hollywood is a screaming monopoly. Streaming giant inherits Batman and Casablanca, HBO, Game of Thrones, the century-old studio. Writers Guild say the writing is on the screen. Theater owners are warning quarter of the box office could vanish altogether. Netflix promises support. Unions say we've read that script before. Regulators in the U.S. and Europe now hold the keys to Gotham. Video killed a radio star. Streaming's eating the movie star. Moving on to this, Indonesia. The Indonesian flood disaster, over 900 killed, hundreds still missing. The cyclone wipes 100,000 homes. The scope of the damage still unfolding, still unclear. Villages swept away. Families on rooftops for 3 days in a row without food. Inmates were even released from one prison before it floods. Nowhere else to send them. Looting breaks out at supermarkets. The situation is literally waist deep in mud. Now, from forces of nature to negligence of humans. Goa nightclub Inferno kills 25 people. Midnight Saturday, a packed Bollywood DJ night near the beach. Then a gas cylinder explodes. In seconds, a death scene. The thing is, it's not the first, nor the second. The third deadly venue blaze this past year alone. 5.5 million tourists every single year. A chronic fire safety hellscape. Speaking of deadly blazes, Hong Kongers vote as typo fire grief collides with election mood. Ahead of E-Day, authorities have distributed aid to survivors, arrested suspects, and sought to improve building safety as questions keep on rising about what actually happened ahead of this fatal incident.
I feel that completing the election as soon as possible, regardless of the result, can allow everyone to return to being ordinary citizens and go help with the disaster relief work. I think this is our most important spirit. Also, in fact, only when the Legislative Council can operate normally can all our plans be launched as soon as possible.
If I am elected, I also hope to cooperate with the government in carrying out the post-fire disaster relief arrangements so that the different affected people can be better resettled. Afterwards, I also hope to fulfill in the Legislative Council the commitments in our political platform and hope to promote further development of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region government.
The election is the second since 2021 when China made sweeping changes to Hong Kong's electoral system to ensure only patriots, as in loyal to Beijing, could run. South Africa hostile bloodbath, 25 shot, 11 dead, including a 3-year-old. As 3 gunmen stormed the venue in Salisbury Township, west of capital Pretoria. The motivation of the shooting, unknown. No arrests have been made. It is the latest in a string of mass shootings that have rocked the crime-ridden country in recent years. 63 murders per day. 63 daily murders in South Africa. No arrests, no reason, no rule, no law. Now, blocking roadblocks. Russia is banning the gaming giant for poisoning young minds, yanking the plug on one of the world's biggest gaming platforms. Millions of Russian players cut off, citing extremist material, gambling scenarios. The platform's user-generated chaos makes it regulators' nightmare, really, because you build your own game, you build your own liability. If our metaverse is morally bankrupt, What does it say about the other verse, the actual verse, the universe? Huh? And in other alternative verses, news, if you will, Taiwan ghost blocks a red note. This is the TikTok wannabe that boomed when Americans fled the mother app. Now it hits security restrictions. 3 million users locked out after 1,700 fraud cases drained $8 million. No local office, no cybersecurity plan, no one to call. It is also a political tinderbox. Beijing viewing the app as soft power bait, so to speak, while Taiwan shouts disinformation. We're gonna call ghost blockers. And Martin Luther King Day out. Trump's B-Day in. National parks free days undergo modernization. Removes two civil rights holidays, Juneteenth and MLK, but keeps 9 patriotic days. 4th of July, of course, Flag Day, Trump Day, and that's too for U.S. residents only. Foreigners pay even on free days. Make America camp again, right? Epstein files round gazillion. House Democrats release images from Little St. James bedrooms, masks, dental chair, Pope photo. Any conclusions here? Your responsibility alone. Images shed little new light. Just an opulent glimpse on trafficking islands, if you will. Trump signed a bill. Justice must release all files by December 19th. The clock is ticking. What a peculiar early Christmas gift for Americans, right? All right. And speaking of holiday spirit, Bethlehem lights the tree again, but it is not yet a merry, joyful Christmas.
We need to celebrate this occasion. This is the birthplace of Jesus Christ, and this is the first time after 2 years of the war. People, they have passed through a lot of agony and pain, unemployment, a lot of troubles and sadness. So it is time now that we share our happiness and joy to share this moment.
Yes, but hotel bookings are a bit up, shops still empty. So praying for peace, waiting for tourists, celebrating Thursday Christmas, where it all began. Hopefully it will be a merry, merry Christmas later on this month. All right, we have reached the summit. Let's go. And tonight, we are delighted to welcome to the summit Jeffrey S. Korn, Director of the Center for Military Law at Texas Tech University, Mr. Eagle Marcus, Director of Republican Overseas Israel, and our very own I-24 News Senior Correspondent Owen Alterman. Thank you, gentlemen, so very much for joining us tonight. As we ask, are we talking about the fog of war or the fog of the Secretary of War? Is the battle against narco-terror firing back? Before we begin our conversation, let's take a deeper look.
The U.S. military's campaign against suspected drug smuggling boats in the Caribbean has spiraled into a political firestorm. The controversy centers on a September strike that sank a vessel and reportedly killed 11 people, followed by an even more explosive allegation that 2 unarmed survivors clinging to the wreckage were killed in a so-called double-tap strike. Critics say this violates long-standing U.S. military rules that protect incapacitated shipwrecked individuals, raising the specter of a potential war crime. Into the storm stepped Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who publicly defended the operation and stated that he would have made the same call himself. The Pentagon insists the strike was lawful and aimed at preventing further threats, but bipartisan pressure has grown in Congress, with lawmakers demanding transparency, investigations, and accountability. The uproar now goes beyond one incident. It raises deeper questions about the rules governing force when there is no formally declared war, the limits of executive authority, and how far military leaders can go in the name of national security. Did Hegseth push beyond the limits of his authority? Is it time for Hegseth to step aside? How do we define the fog of war when no war has been declared? What legal consequences could or should follow?
All right, gentlemen. So what should be the legal consequences from this point onwards? As always, we begin our conversation with a quick fire round, 30 seconds each to lay out your initial stance on the matter, and we pick up the conversation from there. So, Mr. Korn, please take the lead. Your 30 seconds are on.
Well, I think the problem overall is that the United States has characterized what is fundamentally a law enforcement problem as a war and has therefore invoked the authority to kill people as a measure of first resort pursuant to wartime law. But there is almost complete unanimity among the international legal community that this is not a legitimate characterization for this problem. So for me, it's not just the double tap. It's not the second attack that raises problems. It's the first attack, which is a deviation from the longstanding practice of maritime interdiction and apprehension. And when you squeeze a legal round peg into an operational square hole, you're going to end up with operational overbreath and perception of overzealousness of the use of force, which is what I think this incident really reveals.
It's not the second, it's the first. It's the mere beginning. Mr. Eagle Marcus, your 30 seconds are on. Your take.
Well, this is narco-terrorism, and these are terrorists who are attacking the United States of America. Now, when there's an active attack on the United States of America with these drugs that literally can kill thousands and thousands of people, you have a moral responsibility as the government to actually defend your homeland, to defend our country and our innocence from people who are out to kill us. And at the end of the day, it's exactly what we have here. We have finally a president who says, you know what, we're actually going to put an end to this war on drugs. We are going to defend our homeland. And as you know, we're very concerned about talking about the innocence, so to speak, on these boats. But what about the thousands and thousands of people who get potentially drugged and overdosed from the drugs that these people are carrying? Guess what? Those are the innocents we should be protecting, and not these narco-terrorists.
All right. Last but not least, our Owen Alterman, your thoughts.
Elliot, may well be that we're taking a square peg and putting it into a round hole. What the United States needs to do is to chisel a square hole, because it's a square peg, meaning that it seems pretty clear that this is illegal, that this is against international law. But the law is just not adequate. It's giving a huge advantage to the drug smugglers. What the law essentially says, Ellie, is that the police have to go, or the Coast Guard has to go, or even the Navy has to go, or the Marines, and basically take over every ship smuggling drugs. But how do you actually deter the drug smuggling? How do you actually take on the crime bosses? This is what Donald Trump tweeted about, that anyone smuggling drugs into the United States needs to, and he used the all caps, of course, beware. The law doesn't actually give the United States or other countries the tools to make those people beware. And Ellie, I hope we can talk about what it is the United States can do about it.
So from this point onwards, gentlemen, please feel free to interact. And let's start from this exact position. Professor Korn, listening to all three of you, I suspect that's what we need to do at this very beginning of this conversation, is to frame the right question. Are we talking about a clear definition of war, yes or no? And is that allocating the power to the following actions?
Well, let me say, I think I've been one of the most ardent advocates for a broad and pragmatic characterization of both the right of a state to defend itself against non-state armed groups and what qualifies as an armed conflict.
Right.
But comparing the activities of a drug smuggling syndicate with a group like Hamas or Hezbollah or ISIS is like comparing a musket to a Tomahawk cruise missile. The second speaker used the critical word, attack. Attack involves an intentional use of violence against an opponent. And there's no evidence that these groups are intending to kill Americans. Now, I don't underestimate the adverse impact of narcotics, and I think it's a terrible thing. And I applaud the Trump administration for designating these groups as foreign terrorist organizations. But what that does legally is expand criminal response authority. It does not in any way vest the president with authority to essentially start a war. And there has been insufficient proof that enhancing international law enforcement efforts would be ineffective in dealing with this problem. So we can talk about chiseling a square hole, but what we're really doing is saying, because it's hard to enforce law, we're simply going to bypass those mechanisms and start killing people as a measure of first resort, when what they do doesn't come close to the type of intentional attacks and violence inflicted on the United States and other countries by groups like Al-Qaeda.
So this is an even more profound question here. And Owen, I want to jump back to you. intent or result? What has greater weight here?
Well, look, I think it's, again, clear that this is an attack, Ellie, under traditional international law. And I think that's pretty settled. But, you know, we heard from the speaker is that the cartels are not intentionally killing Americans. But of course they are. They're smuggling drugs into the United States. Yes, they're doing it to make money, but they are fully know that they're going to be killing many, many Americans in the process. And the Trump administration has made that clear. What needs to happen is the United States needs to work with other countries in the Western Hemisphere or around the world to change international human rights law to give states more tools to take on drug cartels. Because the United States and other countries are simply losing the drug war and the war on drugs, or even if it's just a metaphorical war, because they simply don't have the tools. Yes, it's a slippery slope, Ellie. There are a lot of dangerous substances. You don't want General Greta Thunberg to build a militia or raise money for a B-2 to knock out oil facilities because oil is dangerous. Of course, it's a slippery slope, but still there need to be more tools to have a real deterrent, because there's no deterrent on the people in those boats, because the worst case, their ship gets interdicted, and assuming they're not shooting at the Navy or the Marines or the police or the Coast Guard, the worst that happens is they get a trial and they go to jail. There needs to be a real deterrent on them, or even better yet, Ellie, not the foot soldiers, but the crime bosses who are sending them. And there needs to be a new international convention agreed upon by the United States and other countries to allow that. And yes, it'll take a long time. It's not a solution tomorrow or the next day, but over the medium term, there can be progress made, and the United States can be on more solid ground and have better tools to fight the drug smuggling the way it should be fought.
So,
and how many thousands of people and how many thousands of innocents are going to be dead by the time that gets done? You and I both know that when you look to the international community for any kind of consensus, it takes years and years and years and years. And we don't have time. People are dying. Now, one thing to note is that, you know, Venezuela and Iran and Hezbollah, they're allies. They're allies. So how much money from these illegal drug billions and billions of dollars, between 250 and 350 metric tons of cocaine every year transits Venezuela or is actually produced there? Now, think about it. How many innocent people have to die before we actually can get something done? It's enough. And how much money is flowing? How much money is flowing from Venezuela to our wonderful allies in Iran and Hezbollah to fund the terror that has absolutely overturned the entire Middle East and has caused thousands of people to die? It's got to stop. President Trump is trying to stop it. Now, granted, can we actually get consensus? I hope. That's years away, and I'm not willing to give up thousands and thousands of American lives and lives around the entire world on why we wait.
I'll jump in very quickly. Look, I understand what you're saying. It's not a frivolous argument, but the United States still needs to act within the law. And we've seen this president use tools creatively to get countries to do what he wants pretty quickly. So there's no reason that Donald Trump couldn't use those tools, tariffs, aid, trade, whatever, you name it. You're from Republicans abroad. Donald Trump has shown that he has tools of foreign policy, that if an issue is a foreign policy priority, he can make it happen quickly. He can make it happen through the law, that the law can be changed and tools can be had. And the United States doesn't have to rely on a square hole, but can chisel on a round hole, but can chisel a square one in order to win the war on drugs the way it should be won.
Professor Korn, please.
You know, it's interesting. It's interesting that when we talk about international cooperation, the perception that the United States has exceeded its legal authority, that it's adopting an invalid characterization of both armed attack, triggering the right of self-defense, and armed conflict, justifying attacking these groups, has led to a loss of international cooperation. Some of our closest allies have backed away from providing actionable intelligence in the region. And another point that I'd like to make that I think is often overlooked, it's very simple to talk about killing people, using the military to kill people. But men and women in the military have to execute those orders, and they have a right to moral clarity. Legal clarity provides moral clarity. And when you provide legal uncertainty, you provide moral uncertainty. And it's easy to forget that when an order is given, somebody's got to pull the trigger on that missile. And we owe our armed forces that legal and moral clarity. If we need more resources, more international cooperation. I am fully in support of that, and I would encourage the administration to seek that type of support from Congress. But to simply unilaterally declare that I can designate a group a terrorist organization because they cause harm to the United States. War is not dictated by harm. And if the status of war is based on how many Americans are killed every year by a dangerous substance, more Americans are killed from alcohol abuse. 12,000 Americans a year die from drunk driving. Are we going to start blowing up drunk drivers with drone attacks? That's not how we define war. I supported the president's attack on Iran. I co-authored an op-ed in the Washington Post to support it because all of the requirements of international law supported that assertion of military power. The vast majority of international experts reject that, and we are losing the type of international cooperation and support that our other guests said is so important in this campaign.
So, Mr. Marcus, please chime in. Yeah.
How about this for moral clarity? Thousands of people are dying, and they're not the people.
So let's blow up drunk drivers.
And I'm talking about innocence. The difference between drunk driving and drugs is that drugs are much more lethal than alcohol. You can drink alcohol and be absolutely fine for 99% of the time. When you
12,000 innocent people die every year.
The difference between drunk driving and the drug cartels is the drug cartels are organized groups who are operating transnationally to bring the drugs into the United States. Drunk drivers are people who are acting horrifically, recklessly by going and driving after they're drunk. It's a different kind of problem. But I'm
not advocating blowing up drunk drivers. I'm pointing out that you don't define war by harm. You define it by attack. An attack is an intentional use of force. You would have to be the drug syndicate in the world to have the goal of killing your consumers. They are your consumers. It's easy to characterize this as a war if you want to make the problem look like a nail because you want to use the military as your hammer. But as a matter of international law and operational reality, this is not stretching the envelope. This is shredding the envelope.
Yeah, but are policing powers enough? Is law enforcement enough, traditional law enforcement, to take on drug cartels who are dominating, who have dominated parts of the Western Hemisphere? Is that enough? I agree with you. The existing law doesn't support what's going on. But
there is a reason why the admiral in Southcom resigned. There's a reason why he resigned. When he took command about a year ago, he emphasized that a big part of the mission of Southcom was international drug interdiction. And when he was pressed by the Secretary of Defense to start treating this as a war, suddenly he resigned. Now, he has not come out and said exactly why, but it's not hard to infer that there was a recognition that we're exceeding our authority. Again, I am all for stretching the envelope. I've been one of the ardent supporters of Israel's campaign against organized armed groups engaged in hostilities. But to call this the same as Hezbollah or Hamas because there are American citizens dying from drug overdoses is a complete distortion.
But just by looking at past experience, Obama, Bush, Clinton, everyone tried sanctions, tried diplomacy. It didn't work. Cartels only got stronger. Venezuela worsened. So maybe Trump is just trying to do the work.
Or well, I mean, that's interesting in and of itself, because even if we accept that proposition that this is war, where is the evidence that the vast bulk of fentanyl is coming from Venezuela? That's a distortion. That's not where it comes from. Number two, how do we identify members of the enemy armed group? I started my career as an intelligence officer. What is the threat identification criteria that justifies you to start killing people? You can't just paint this broad brush.
And I do want to add one point before we throw it over to Mark. And in this, I agree 100%. Look, if the law doesn't allow it, the United States military can't simply blatantly violate the law. That's not a policy option, or shouldn't be. Again, there is an alternative. I've sketched it out. Yes, it doesn't provide an immediate fix, but it provides a better fix over the course of time. But just because the problem can't be solved with current tools doesn't mean that you can simply make your own tools if they're not provided by under the law.
Interesting choice of words, an immediate fix when we're talking about drug cartels. Ego Marcus, your thoughts?
No further comment. I've repeated myself a few times. I think that at the end of the day, we've got a serious problem.
All right.
And We have to deal with it instead of kicking the can down the road, waiting for the international community to rewrite law in order to accommodate the reality that Venezuela has a gigantic coastline, and it's almost impossible to regulate and to control. And in terms of deterrence, by the way, you want a deterrence, but the American military has surrounded Venezuela, and these boats are still coming out.
Right. All right.
Well, we're finding them to blow them up. So somehow we're identifying them. If we can find them to blow them up, we can find them to
interdict. All right, gentlemen, we're just putting a comma right here, not a dot, because we're taking a quick break. But when we get back, we will expand our conversation further out to the global chessboard, if you will, how it impacts U.S. adversaries. So please do stay with us, Professor Korn, Eagle, Marcus Owen Alterman. We'll be right back.